All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John with Murder by the Book. And tonight I'm really excited that we are going to be joined by Marty Wingate to talk about her newest book, Murder. I just blanked on the title. Murder is a Must, and Jenn McKinlay with her new book, which is called One for the Books. So I'm going to get into it. If you guys have any questions while we are chatting, please make sure that you drop those in the comments here on YouTube, and I will relay those. So Jenn McKinlay is the award-winning New York Times, USA Today, and Publishers Weekly bestselling author of several mystery and romance series. Her work has been translated into multiple languages and countries all over the world. She lives in sunny Arizona in a house that is overrun with kids, pets, and her husband's guitars. How are you tonight, Jenn?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing well, thanks. We were saying beforehand, it's so good to see you. It's been a while since we've had you at the bookstore, so it's nice that we get to catch up this way.
I like it.
Yeah. A Seattle native, Marty Wingate is a member of the Royal Horticultural Society and leads garden tours throughout England, Scotland, and Ireland when she is not killing people in fiction. How are you tonight, Marty?
I'm doing great, John. It's nice to be here.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I'm so glad that we were able to do this. I know, Marty, your book was originally supposed to come out, was it October?
It was the beginning of October, and you know how things got shifted around this year. It was really weird. So I was lucky. It was just a clean 2-month shift, and that was it.
Yeah, there was a period in like June and July when everything got shifted that like none of us had any idea when anything came out anymore. People were like, I want this book. And we're like, I don't know when that book is supposed to come out anymore, which is not ideal. But luckily, it seems like things have, for the most part, kind of have settled, at least for whatever our new regular at the moment is. So I'm so excited that we get to chat with you guys tonight. I'm going to start with Marty. Can you tell us a little bit about the new book, Murder is a Must, and the first edition series as a whole?
Certainly. The first edition library series is set in Bath in England. All my books are set in England. I'm forced to travel when I can to research. And it concerns a library full of first editions in rare collectible books from the golden age of mystery, mostly the women authors, and was a private collection until it was turned into a sort of a public library. And my protagonist is Haley Burke. She is curator of the library, helps out with the first edition society. She just started her job in The Bodies in the Library, book 1 last year, and she's never read a mystery in her life. And so she has a lot of catching up to do. In book 2, Murder is a Must, which is just out today, she's learned a little bit more and is hoping to put on an exhibition about Lady Fleming, who started the library. So every book has a golden age of mystery theme. The Bodies in the Library, obviously, an Agatha Christie theme. And in Murder is a Must, it's Dorothy L. Sayers.
All right. And Jenn, can you tell us a little bit about the newest in your series, One for the Books, and a little bit about your Library Lovers series?
Sure. He warned me that he was going to ask me, so I had to like duck in because I wrote it a while ago. This one came out in September. And as you can tell from the cover, there might be a wedding in it, you know. I always lose count. I think we're on 10 or 11 in the Library Lover series, but it's set in a Connecticut coastal town, fictional, called Briar Creek, and the amateur sleuth is the library director, Lindsay, and she finds dead bodies in the library and the town, and we solve, you know, the mysteries. And she has I was a public librarian for a long time. And for a lot of my material, I use, you know, years in service and stuff. So it's kind of nice to work out all that like patron aggravation. So Dean James, who writes as Miranda James, he and I talk quite often about how we, you know, work out our issues in the library. I mean, it was a fantastic job and I loved it so much. And it's such a perfect setting for mysteries because everybody goes to the library. So you have so many people coming and going. In this particular one, the amateur sleuth, Lindsay, is finally marrying her boat captain, Sully. But are they really? Because in the opening, they go to the big town Christmas party, and the guy who's supposed to marry them, who just happens to be dressed as an elf, is found dead, dressed as an elf.
Yeah, so I love there's something about books in general, because before I worked at Murder by the Book, I was a bookseller at Borders for years. I think there's just something about books that kind of brings, I don't want to say crazy people, but there's just something that brings, we all have those experiences, whether it's patrons or customers, that you're just like, you're a little off sometimes. So it's funny and before that, I worked at a bookstore / coffee shop on the coffee side. And yeah, kind of the same situation. There's definitely a wealth of material there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but one of the things that I'm really excited about the pandemic, and that seems like a weird thing to say, is that we get to be able to have conversations about books, and we've really been able to highlight cozy mysteries in a way that we kind of weren't able to do in store, because traditionally a lot of them come out as paperback originals. So it's hard for kind of publishing budgets to work out events unless it's a local author to kind of fly somebody somewhere for a book that's a paperback original. So I'm so excited that we've been able to kind of triumph cozies more with this. So for people who are watching this either live or are going to tune in later and might not know what a cozy mystery is, what is a cozy mystery for you? Let's start with Jenn.
Ooh, that's such a good question. When I started writing, I didn't know what a cozy was. The agent that I signed with kind of shepherded me in that direction, because I tend to write comedy, and for what I was interested in, she said, if you could come up with a really good hook, you could write a cozy. And I was like, okay, what's a cozy? And I was a librarian and I didn't know what a cozy was. So she finally explained it to me. It's kind of when you take Agatha Christie and you find something like Library, or my other series is Cupcake Bakery series. You find that one little hook that people can lock in on, whether it's recipes or library recommendations, and it kind of draws them in. For me, a cozy, like what I write, I kind of consider an Agatha Christie, I Love Lucy mashup. But I think for most people, cozy it's traditional. It's Agatha Christie, it's blood off the page, it's settings you want to live in, characters you want to hang out with, noirs and thrillers, not necessarily people you want to have as your besties. But with cozies, you do want to hang out with them. They're kind of like family, at least to me.
Yeah. The same for me. How about you, Marty? Do you have anything to add to that?
Everything that Jenn said. I do consider cozies they did develop out of traditional mysteries, the genre, with the amateur sleuth, and that was Miss Marple or Poirot, whichever, Lord Peter in most of them. Then there are the police procedurals, those are different. I do think that one thing that cozies do that the golden age of mystery, traditional mysteries, did not do is that most of us have a series arc as well as a plot line for every single book. So, finally Lindsay is getting married, we think, in a very small wedding, right? A very small wedding. So, you built that over. And so I love that. That's one reason I love cozies. And that's why I write them, because I like the character arc just as much as I like each murder mystery story. And I think that it's interesting to see. I don't think Miss Marple is terribly funny, but there's a bit of humor in the Poirot books.
Okay.
And I really enjoy that. That's fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great point. That, like you said, the golden age mystery writers, they didn't write kind of series in the way that we think. So like you didn't need to pick up the Poirot or the Marple books in order, because you knew the character was pretty much going to be kind of the character in every book, and there wasn't going to be growth. And that's one of the things that I also love about a good cozy series, is kind of getting to see not only the characters get to grow and change, but you also get kind of to meet all of the other members of the community that sort of become kind of family members to these people. And it just becomes this kind of just wonderful little world that, like Jenn said, you just kind of want to like visit and hang out in.
I've actually asked readers before, when you're starting a new book and you're in the same community, whether it's a big city or a village, do readers want to check in with the same characters, even if they don't have a really big part in this particular book? And all the readers said, yes, just mention them. Come stop in for coffee or something, okay?
It's kind of like one of the characters in the Cupcake Bakery. If you've ever read Stephanie Ivanovich, and the Stephanie, I mean, Janet Ivanovich, the Stephanie Plum series, and she has the hamster Rex that doesn't die. I wrote an 80-year-old character in the Cupcake books, and I'm like, he's getting up, he's gonna be like 105 and still making cupcakes. Because I can't even imagine killing him off. I would be driven out of town, literally.
Yeah.
And so with cozies, I find that there are writers that kind of take two different angles with it. There are the authors that want you to get to know kind of the murder victim before they off them, so the murder might not take place until like maybe 70 pages into the book. And then there are the writers that it's like, boom, at the end of the first chapter, there is a dead body on the floor, and then you kind of get to find out more about that person later. Do y'all have a preference when you're writing for one or the other, and do you have a preference when you're reading? Let's start with Marty this time.
Well, interesting you should ask that, John, because I do get that pointed out to me occasionally, that in my books, the body doesn't show up until about page 50, at least. And I was talking or having an email exchange with someone in my writing group about this, because she's looking to be published, and she's going through one of her books right now. And I have always wanted to get to know the characters. Not that I won't read a book where the body's found in the first chapter. That's fine with me, but I do like getting to know the people. And I realize that I think what this came from is the first adult mystery series I read. It was the rabbi books, and I don't know if anybody remembers them. Harry Kimmelman. Monday, the rabbi did this. Tuesday, the rabbi. I remember when I was in high school, my mom was reading them, my sister was reading them, I was reading them, and I swear you could be halfway through the book before a dead body came around. So I love that because I love the people in it and I love their stories. So I tend to be slow about the body.
Yeah, same. Marty, what she does really well, I love this new series of yours, by the way, as you know, because I got to read the first one and I have the second one on my list. But you write a setting really well. Because I've been to Bath, and when I read it, I really fell in love with your series because you capture this, like the setting is also a character for you, and you captured it really, really well. So I didn't care that the body came later because I was so into meeting the people and the setting and the where the library was. I just have to say, you did an excellent job. It's a fantastic series.
I certainly do have fun with that. And I love reading Peter Lovesey's books, the Peter Diamond series, and they're set in Bath too, but of course they're police procedurals. And so I have a tendency to think, we were watching, there's a British police show that just has 2 episodes and it's set in Bath, and my husband and I were watching it. And the first thing we talked about during the entire first show was, why aren't they walking in a pub? Why aren't they walking in a pub? Because we know where all the pubs are in Bath. Finally did.
Well, me, I know where the candy shop is in Bath.
Yeah, there you go. I know Haley knows where all the great places for tea and cake are in Bath. But now when you're using a fictional setting, it's not truly fictional. What do you bring in from what you know?
Ooh, that's because I've done both. I've done real locations, like I do a London Hat Shop series, and it's on Portobello. It's set on Portobello Road with the market, and because research, as you know, it's a hard job. So that one you have to get right, as you know, writing about Bath. You've got to get the setting right. It has to have its own substance. But when I do the fiction, like the Library Lover series is based on a real town where I lived. So Briar Creek in this series is actually Stony Creek. There actually is an archipelago of islands where back in the day, like the Vanderbilt Astors, that kind of, the people who were also in Newport, Rhode Island, also had vacation homes on these islands. Like at one point, one of the islands, I think, had a movie theater and a bowling alley. So they're called the Symbol Islands, and there's a tour and everybody should go on it because it's super cool. But I just renamed it the Thumb Islands. I did it because having lived there, I know how persnickety the local historians are, and I didn't want anybody up in my biz if I got stuff wrong. Portobello Road, you're probably not going to get wrong because you stick to kind of the main, you hit the high points and you've got this. But when you've lived in a place and you know everybody, and like my mom grew up there, so it was like, I can't. So fiction. So I kind of pick and choose depending.
Exactly. Yeah. I have inserted a few sort of fictional places into Bath. In Murder is a Must, I needed a building that would house an exhibition for Lady Fowling that would go on more than a weekend. And all I could find the Guild Hall, I could find the assembly rooms that had space for a day, a special event for a day. So I just picked the building across the road from the assembly rooms and pretended that the corner is the Charlotte, a lovely exhibition space. They may want to talk to me about that. I don't know. And the only other thing I've done so far is I changed the name of one of the pubs. It's a real pub. It's there. It's on Northumberland Place, but it's called the Coeur de Lion. I changed the name to the Minerva. That's my nod to the Roman baths, the Roman part of Bath's history. So that's the only thing I did.
No, that's good. I think that's good. I think that's a nice balance.
Yeah.
So since you guys have both mentioned setting, I'm curious, Marty, your books, this series is set in England, and Jen, you've done the Hat Shop series that are set in England. And that's we don't typically tend to see a lot of cozy mysteries that are set kind of outside of the US. We're starting to see some more kind of in the recent years, but for the most part, they've kind of all been in small American towns. So what made you guys want to set books in the UK like that? Let's start with Jen this time.
Oh, I wanted to go on vacation. At that point, I think I had 4 different mystery series going, 2 under pseudonyms, 2 under my name, and it was just like, ugh. And then the royal wedding popped up, and it was just one of those things. It was like the middle of the night, and I was watching the royal wedding, and then Princess Beatrice showed up with that hat. And I was, you're half dead, tired, and I'm sure I was probably on deadline. And I was just watching it, and of course, the internet took off, and everybody was so mean. And I was watching it, and I was thinking, oh God, if someone made me wear that hat, I'd want to kill him. And then I just wrote up the idea, and I sent it to my editor, and she was like, yes. And I was like, London, here I come. So yeah, it was just kind of one of those perfect circumstance, because I needed one more series.
Of course.
Right?
I do still lead garden tours to England and Scotland and Ireland. And so that's probably what gave me the idea to begin with. And my husband and I like to go over every year. We even, shocking as though this may seem, we're over there in March this year. Oh. We went, this is the quickest trip ever. We flew over on March 11th. And remember, we're going from Seattle, so it's a long ways away. Well, yeah, Jen. We flew over on March 11, landed on March 12, and flew back on March 15. And we didn't even have any jet lag. It was amazing.
Wow.
But I used the time wisely while we were there, and we've missed it, of course, the rest of the year. So we usually find apartments to stay in where we go, and like to sit for a week in one city. So next year.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, that's crazy, because we had our last in-store event at Murder by the Book was Deanna Rayburn on March 13th. And that was like the day before they had canceled the Houston rodeo. And I think the middle of like the next week was when we had gotten our first stay-at-home order. So that's crazy that you were like, so you got there and you saw what was happening and just turned around?
Well, when we landed, we heard that there were going to be restrictions for travelers coming into the US. Now, not residents, we had more time, but we thought, oh my gosh. And we were flying Virgin Atlantic. And I was able to they are efficient people. They already had it up on their website. If you want to change, there will be no change fee. Send us a text. I did. I waited. So 2 days later, they texted back and said, we can get you home tomorrow. We said, okay.
Wow. I was at Left Coast Crime. You guys should have been at Left Coast Crime in San Diego.
Oh my gosh, yes. I've heard about people arriving. Yeah, that's right. Here we are. Bye.
There's some swag. Gotta go.
Oh, yeah. That's too bad.
So I had a couple questions from the crowd. Jen, a couple people have asked, are there going to be any more books in the Hat Shop series?
So I keep seeing your cat's tail go by. You have to tell me the name of the cat before I can answer anything.
Mine is Calvin. He's my orange one. How about you, Marty? I thought I saw a tail pop up too.
Yes, that was Verena. And we have a black one named Cornbread.
Oh, I love that. I've got King George, but he's asleep on on the fellow over there. He's like, I don't care.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry. Now, what was the question? Because
Are there going to be any more Hat Shop series books?
I don't know. We loved writing the last one, and I think it's really just time. And weirdly, think being quarantined, I would be able to write more. But the problem is, I'm kind of used to being alone in my house, and I'm not alone. I have one college kid who's online, so he didn't move out, and I've got one high school kid who's online, and I've got a husband online. Yeah. So productivity, not what you would think being quarantined. So I hope so. And I have a really good idea, because I know that yet there's another possible wedding maybe. And I'd love to do it in a castle. So I'll have to like grill Marty. I don't know where you are in everybody else's screen. To me, you're down there.
Yeah.
But so I'll have to grill you some, get some questions. Maybe we'll have the wedding in Bath. That would be awesome. Right?
Yeah.
I'll have to do your research. I'll go on one of your garden tours.
Okay.
But I guess my answer is I hope so.
Okay. So, and then Marty, we've also had a couple people ask if you were going to have any more books in the Birds of a Feather series.
Those were my two digital only series are haven't had a new one in a while, but I have to have another book in the Birds of a Feather series, even if I have to write a short story to wrap up that story. And there will possibly be also another Potting Shed story. That's the American Gardener in England. So yeah, I don't consider, in fact, I was renaming, I had a character in the third first edition library book, which is now with my editor. And I wasn't happy with her name. You get to a point and you think, I don't think so. Sometimes you think, oh yeah, I know who this is. And I was thinking of a different name for her, and I thought, oh, I'll call her this. And then I thought, oh no, I can't call her that, because that's a character in the Birds of a Feather series, and she's still alive in my head. So yeah, they're in there somewhere.
So for both of you guys, so as you're working on series, or as you're starting a new series, do you kind of have the character arc in mind already, or is it something that you discover from book to book? Let's start with Jen.
Oh, that's a really good question, because it's kind of a blind panic. I mean, you get a lot of feedback from readers, which I appreciate. And they'll be like, why did they break up? Because the couple is together apart. Well, I'll tell you why. Because when I wrote Cupcake, I was convinced cupcakes were a fad. It was going to go 3 books, 3 and done, bye, see you later. Well, we're on like 13 now. Who knew? So, to kind of make the character arc go longer than I expected, it was like, break them up, put them back, break them up, put them back. Sorry, But what really cracks me up, and this is my little side note, is you'll meet mystery readers who are like, I don't like romance. I'm not interested. You can't make me read your romances. Yes, I can. I'm kidding, mostly. But say I'm not interested. Oh, okay, but these are the exact same people who send me endless emails on why aren't they together? Why didn't they get married? I'm waiting. Figure this out. And how dare you break them up? And I'm not speaking to you ever again. And I love you all for how much you care. But it cracks me up, because then I'm like, really? You don't read romance, but you are so invested in the relationships in these characters. So that kind of cracks me up. That's a little side note. But and I forgot the question again. When you start the series, do you have the character arc in mind? But it sounds like to you that a lot of it just kind of happens as you're. It's more like your publisher comes to you and says, "Can we have 3 more?" And you go, "Okay, break them up." And then you hope it all comes together. I don't know what everybody's getting married in my book, so this is going to be interesting. I don't know. What about you, Marty?
I love a little romance and a mystery, obviously, because there are romances in my mysteries, and so I'm always like seeing that. And I will say, just a golden age of mystery note here. Dorothy L. Sayers started out saying there should be no romance in mysteries, and then Peter met Harriet Vane.
One of my favorite characters ever. I love Harriet.
Yes, exactly, and that was the end of that. She still wrote a few whimsy books that didn't have Harriet Vane in them. But even in Murder Must Advertise, she does not appear at all. there's one line and you know that that's who when he thinks of this woman, and you know that. So anyway, so I do see, I don't see an entire arc, because that means I would see the end of the series. But I see progress, you know, with the main character and the important characters around her. I certainly see how they develop.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah. And so another question I wanted to ask, especially for you, Marty, you know, you have your character, she is kind of in charge of this mystery library, but she doesn't know anything about mysteries and she hasn't read them before, which I will admit, when I first started working at Murder by the Book, I kind of knew the genre a little, but I was like, I had never read an Agatha Christie book before I got hired at Murder by the Book, which is now out there in the world, so the internet will know forever. But I thought it was a really interesting way to be able to kind of teach people about the Golden Age. And I was also curious about the research that you did about not only kind of Golden Age mysteries, but also kind of the rare editions, like the potential book that's gone missing in this new one.
Yes. Oh, I'm having great fun with that. I did think that starting my protagonist out as not knowing anything about the Golden Age of mystery would be fun for people who knew a lot about it, because they would say, oh, she doesn't know that. She doesn't know who Inspector Allen is, you know. And would also be a way to bring people who don't know about those authors, bring them along. And so Haley's learning as some of the readers are learning as well. And she really didn't know. I mean, she's seen movies. That's about all she could say about it. But in Murder is a Must, Haley comes across a letter, a draft of a letter, Lady Fowling. Lady Fowling died 3 years before the bodies in the library started, and she was 94. She has a very interesting history, and she's left this wonderful library in the house she used to live in one of those terraced houses in Bath. Haley runs across a draft of a letter that Lady Fowling wrote to Dorothy L. Sayers saying, thank you so very much for the signed first edition of Murder Must Advertise, signed by all the members of the Detection Club. So people who know the Golden Age of mystery will say, oh my gosh, all the members, did anyone do that? No, I made that part up. But there is a book, there is a missing book somewhere that was signed by all the members of the Detection Club. So Haley's looking at all of these. A lot, Dorothy L. Sayers' books were published, and others were published by Golanz. They're still around, Gollanz. Now they do, I think, mostly sci-fi and fantasy, but they were the mystery publisher in Britain then. And the covers were all yellow with bold black writing. It's kind of boring compared to what we have today. Compared to vintage paperbacks, they're quite boring, that's for sure. And so there are so many different editions of the books in the first edition library that Haley's looking through all the Dorothy L. Sayers book thinking, well, maybe there's a dust jacket on the wrong book. Maybe this book is here on a shelf somewhere. So I get to talk about the war editions of the books and how they were on, just really, really thin paper. And I did do a fair bit of research into what the books look like. My purchases have all been just old beat up vintage paperbacks though, sadly.
Yeah, as Jen mentioned, she mentioned Dean James, who writes as Miranda James. In one of the books in his Cat in the Stack series, there's a book collector in there, and he said basically that he just kind of gave that collector any of the books that he coveted for his own collection.
Absolutely.
And so, Jen, on the flip side, I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit about the process of creating or researching your recipes for the cupcake series?
Oh yeah, that's it's kind of, I guess it's kind of like what Dean was saying about the books. When I'm writing and I get to that point where, there needs to be a recipe, or I know they need to talk about a cupcake that's going to be a recipe, it's kind of like, well, what would I want right now? So I just sit there, I'm like, I really want a root beer float cupcake. Yeah. And then I worry about figuring out the recipe later. But with cupcakes, I mean, really, once you have a basic vanilla chocolate recipe, then you're really just going in and tweaking it to make it, what it needs to be. Like if I have a standard vanilla cupcake recipe, I can just throw in orange, and then you've got an orange and vanilla. And, it got at the beginning, it was a lot of work. It was a very messy kitchen. It was a lot of pots and pans. It was a lot of cursing. But as we've rolled on now, it's like, oh, I have my foundation cupcake recipe. I can roll, so it got easier. But it's mostly what I want to eat at the moment.
Nice. So we had Sandy asked, she said specifically for Marty, but I'm going to throw this to both of you. She said, Marty, you're a new to her author. Do you think that your books can be read as standalones, or should she read them in series order? And we'll also ask Jen that, but we'll start with Marty.
Oh yeah, because we think of that every time we start a new book. It could be book 2, it could be book 8. And you think at the beginning, now, I don't want to confuse a new reader, but I don't want to bore an old reader. And so I treat each book as if book 2, Murder is a Must, could be picked up and read without reading book 1. Now, I would like you to read book 1, but you don't have to read them in order if you don't want to. Book 3 with my editor should be understandable all on its own, but I don't want to front load that first chapter with all this boring stuff it's not boring, it's very interesting stuff. It's just that if you read it before, you don't want to read it again immediately. So instead, I try to just sort of weave little bits of the backstory in as we go. So I believe she will not be confused by picking up Murder is a Must first.
I think you have to start with book 1 on mine, and you can't deviate. You need to write every book in the series. Actually, that's the librarian in me. I personally can't read. Like if I pick up a book and I see it's book 5, I'm like, and I have to go find book 1 because I want to go with the characters, And I think when you have a long running series, like one for the books, like this one, so much of it is, I hate to say it, but it's the wedding that has taken us maybe, many books to get to. So it is a murder mystery. There is a murder. I think it's a pretty good one. And going back before, I'm like Marty. I tend to write characters you don't like, so that when they're murdered, you don't care, or you're kind of like, yeah, because I'm working out my issues. So there's a lot of buildup in the beginning, and like Marty says, you can weave in that backstory. But for me personally, I'm trying to picture if I picked up a Travis McGee book, like 7-10 books in. There's so much that you would miss in the beginning, because I think a series, it's a character arc through many, many books. So I feel like you probably could if you're just reading for the mystery, but if you're a character-driven reader, I think you always want to try and start with book 1.
And so if you guys are watching and you want to start with book 1 in Library Lovers series, the first one is Books Can Be Deceiving. So Marty, as a reader then, are you you have to read them in order, or do you jump around?
Oh dear, I believe I've done a bit of both. I will say, I remember when I started reading the John Rebus series, Ian Rankin's series set in Edinburgh, I was determined to, and there were almost 20 books out at that time. I was determined to read them in order, and we were in Edinburgh for part of the time, so I was haunting all the used bookstores, because of course most of them were out of print at that point. They've been reprinted, I think. There are some books that I know I need to read in order, and so I will wait around until I get the correct one. But sometimes picking up a later book and reading it accidentally, Jen, a later book, will make me then think, oh, this is really fun. Now I can go back to the beginning and start all over again. So I've done that too.
That's okay.
Yeah, I tend to do that more now as a bookseller, because, we'll get advanced reader copies of something. So if it's, book 6 or 8 into a series, a lot of times I'll pick it up to see whether or not it's a good place for me to jump in personally, who have not read the series. And then it's an easier way to tell customers, hey, you can jump in here. But I'm like you, Marty, if I like it, then I will immediately go back to the beginning and start from there.
Yeah.
So, Jen, you mentioned that you also write under several pseudonyms. You've done romance. You've recently started doing kind of more started doing more fiction. And I read in an interview you said that one of your goals is that you want to be like queen of all genres.
Yes.
So what's it like kind of hopping from genre to genre? Do you know when you start a book that like it's going to be a mystery or it's going to be a romance, or is that something you discover as you're writing?
No, I'm totally a plotter, so I know when something's going to be a mystery. I really, really, really want to break into the fantasy, genre, because I want to be queen of all genre. Crown, right? Not kidding either. I would say I'm kidding, but I'm not kidding. I do want to try that. I just think it's such a fun genre. So someday, I don't know when, because I'm kind of overcommitted right now, but I'm a plotter, so I know when I'm writing a mystery, it has a certain tone, it has a certain vibe, and I have to get in it. And then I know when I'm writing romance, all mine are romantic comedies, so there's the commonality between the two. But I know that with a mystery, I have a dead body, which really helps move a plot along, like amazingly. And I know with a romance, it's really the two characters, they really can't be apart for too long. They need to have something really authentic to work out. And those are actually, for me, more challenging because my personality and my kind of way of being is let's crack a joke and move on. So, when I went into romance, I was just like, ugh, anybody who says that's easy, please kill somebody and write a book around that. That's way easier, I'm just saying. But so it's kind of, it's weird to put on different hats. That's why I'm thinking I need to try fantasy because, why not? I enjoy both. I think romance is harder for me personally. There's a certain relief, I think, because none of my romances, there's no real series in a romance. It's not the same characters book after book, but there's, I think what they call them is a continuity. So you have like book one, I wrote a book series called the Bluff Point series. But it's all set around dogs because I love dogs. You can probably hear mine barking in the background. Yay. The first one is called About a Dog. And in each one, a dog kind of brings the couple together. So in the first one, it's a couple. And then there's all these characters that are peripheral around them. So then book two is another set of characters. And then book three is another. So they're like a continuation, but they're not a series.
Like a shared world instead.
Yeah, so I think with mysteries, and Marty's written series too, and she can probably say the same, there's something really nice about walking into a world that's totally creative. I mean, the first book when you create the world is an endeavor, right? Like when you first went to Bath, it was like, ooh, okay, we're going in. Yeah. But once you've established it, it's kind of like, hey, I'm with the gang and I'm walking the streets I know. And, and with romance, it's, the setting might be the same, but it's different characters. And so everyone is kind of endeavor, just saying. So we'll see what fantasy brings. Definitely a series on that one. If I build a world, we're staying in it,
Yeah. So on your end, Marty, do you outline and plot, and are there any other genres that you would potentially want to tackle at some point?
I do not outline. I hope my editor is not listening to this. I know it's terrible. I will write a description. I will write a story description. I hate to write a synopsis, but I will do it if I have to. But generally, I have enough in my head that I can just start writing and just work. It's like burrowing, a little mole burrowing. Oh, I see a little further ahead now. And then find this little side room to go in and that little side room. And it, we all have our writing styles, and what I do is I write, and then I go back and edit that part I wrote, and then I go a little further writing more, and then I go back and edit that. So I do not write a first draft as many people. It works for many people, but it doesn't work for me. But I am actually breaking into
so let's talk a little bit.
Oh.
Ooh.
Was that you talking to you?
I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, I don't know. It got wonky there for a second.
Oh,
Okay.
well, I was just going to say that I am starting to write historical fiction now, and I have my first one coming out next month. It's set in England, surprise, in World War II, and it's about one of the women ferry pilots who flew Spitfires and Hurricanes around England and Scotland, delivering them to RAF bases.
Wow.
Nice.
And so what's that called and when is it out?
That's called Glamour Girls, and it's out on January 12th from Alcove Press.
Awesome. And so that actually, so Jenn, you just released Paris is Always a Good Idea. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why you wanted to try something kind of like that?
Yeah, that was kind of a huge leap. It's women's fiction, romantic comedy. So it straddles that line between a romantic comedy and women's fiction, where it's a little bit more issue driven. And in that particular book, the issue is grief and getting over loss, which, most people have to do at some point. So my main character is 30 something, kind of a workaholic. Her dad surprises her that he's getting remarried to a woman he hardly knows. So she doesn't respond super enthusiastic. And he questions, why she can't be happy and where did her happiness go? And she realizes she really hasn't been happy since her mother died 7 years ago from cancer. And she's been working for a cancer fundraiser for the last 7 years, kind of as a workaholic. So her sister, who's kind of a wild child, who is an awesome character to write, and who's actually getting her own book next summer, her sister kind of dares her to go back to the year that she was happiest. And it's the working gap year she did in Europe right after college. And she has to find the 3 men that she fell in love with. So she has to go to Ireland and find Colin and Jean-Claude in Paris and Marcellino in Italy. But life being life, her boss kind of keeps her working while she's on this sabbatical. And her work rival is this guy that, just kind of is a thorn in her side. But of course, I can't tell you any more, except you get to go to Italy and Paris and Ireland, and it's super fun. And it was really hard to write because it was just much bigger. It was me being a person who likes to crack a joke and move on. It's like, oh, we're in the hospital, let's be funny, and then can we go? It was really hard to kind of unbox all this stuff. So weirdly, the sister was such a fun character. She's her name's Annabelle, and she's married twice, divorced from both by the age of 28. So she's got her issues too. And her book is called Wait For It, and it comes out next summer. So super fun.
I think it's always fun to see kind of authors get to do new stuff and stretch themselves. Like Juliette Blackwell did similarly, where she started writing these really great books in Paris too. So it's always, I'm the type of reader that when I see somebody trying something different and I've liked their stuff before, I'm always like up for along the ride. See, and so what's it like for both of you then, Jenn, having written this book and then going back into a mystery, or Marty working on historical fiction and then going back into mysteries? Do you feel refreshed when you go back to the other stuff that you were doing before?
You go ahead first, Marty.
Well, I will say, boy, talk about research. I was doing a lot of research for World War II book, but I enjoyed it. I felt like I do like a bit of comedy in my writing. And so my mysteries are like that. And so when I turn to this story, I don't say there's absolutely no humor in it at all, but it's a quieter tone. It's this young woman learning to love to fly and going through the war. And so it's in that sense, even though it's the war, it's a quieter book. And there weren't, though, Jenn, you talked about this, and it's just so perfect when you're writing a murder mystery, you know what needs to happen when. Mm-hmm. Well, I knew what needed to happen in this book because of the war. But I will say that as I was going through the war, I got to this one big event, and it was only 1943 in the story. And I thought, oh, darn, I have 2 more years left of the war. So I had to kind of reshift things and move them along. And so when I finished that, I really love it. I had a wonderful time writing it. But when I turned back then to Haley's story in Bath, I thought, oh, okay, we're off.
Yeah. it's kind of like going home, I think, you know, because the world's established and you know what has to happen, you know. It's I had a really rough summer where I didn't know if I would continue writing, actually. Just, you know, personal tragedies and stuff. And I had a book due, and it was just like, for the first time ever, I thought maybe it's time to fold up shop. And it was horrible. And then it was a cupcake book that I had to write. And I really feel like those characters just pulled me through. It was like I was going home, and it was a home where there wasn't a lot of staff. You know, it was like I could just think about frosting and what shenanigans my characters were up to. And it, you know, and I think and Marty, I'm sure you hear the same thing from your readers, because we do write similar style. That's what you're giving your readers, I think, when you write a cozy and you create that world. It's like, for me, it was the first time my own work kind of saved my sanity. But I hear from people all the time, and that's what they tell me. It's like, you give me a safe place at the end of the day. Like during a pandemic, when everything is just blah, I could pick up, I could read about cupcakes and yeah, there's a dead body, but you know. So I think, like, in a way, for this 2020, this epic year, I came to appreciate the cozy genre and the worlds, you know, I've created, and the readers like Marty that I read in the cozy genre. I came to appreciate all of us like a lot more.
Yeah, I am kind of the resident cozy reader at the store, and I've definitely read way more this year than I have in past years. For the same reason, you kind of look at everything else that's going on, and you just get to escape into this world. And like you said, yeah, there's a murder, but it almost becomes the murder almost becomes secondary, because you get to visit with these sleuths that you love, and, like, you know, they're baristas or the people that they bump into, and these wonderful little towns that you just kind of get to escape into for a while.
Exactly.
Yeah. We said, we were talking about this before we actually went live, that we've had it's been really great. Kind of the last couple of years, there's been this resurgence of interest in the Golden Age mysteries. The British crime classics are reprinting all of these things that have been unavailable for so long. But like now, the stuff that people are really turning to is like Agatha Christie. Like the store is sold out of Agatha Christie stuff multiple times throughout the pandemic. McKenna's, actually, the store owner, is going to be on a podcast in the middle of December, talking about the power of kind of Agatha Christie and those traditional mysteries, kind of in a time like this.
Oh yeah.
So Jen, you mentioned kind of reading also inside the genre. So I'd like to hear from both of you about your reading taste. Do you read other cozies? Do you read outside of the genre? Let's start with Jen.
I read everything. I'm a librarian, retired, but still. I read heavily in the cozy genre. Authors that are leaping to mind are like Lucy Burdett, Marty, Kate Carlisle, Paige Shelton, Dean James, or Miranda James. There's so many. Peg Cochran. See, now I'm afraid I'm going to leave people out. There's just so many. Marty, you covered who I forgot.
I was thinking about those.
But I also read, I read traditional mysteries too. So, and the one I just got turned on to, my husband's a huge noir reader, actually. So he kind of vets those for me. But he got me hooked on Simone St. James. Like
they're so good.
So good. Highly recommend. Like if you're into a little ghosty kind of mystery, like solid mystery, but nice little spine tingle there. So I've been really enjoying her. I love kind of out of the box stuff. Jodi Taylor's The Chronicles of St Mary is fantastic. Mm-hmm. If you're a history buff, you have to read it, especially in England. It's cool. It's totally crazy. I love it. It's kind of a Doctor Who meets, I don't even know. And then I read a lot of romance, like Kwana Jackson and Nia Sosa, Jenny Holiday. You know, a lot of the Abby Jimenez is a huge favorite of mine. And then fantasy, sci-fi, my go-to guy is Kevin Hearn. So, because we used to have lunch together. He used to lived here until he left me, but so he's a favorite.
Wow. Well, all those cozy authors Jen mentioned, and Jen, I read all of them. I I don't, while I'm in the middle of a manuscript, I don't read cozies as much because, I want to hear my voice in my ear. So, in the breaks between, that's when I'll try to catch up with things. But other than that, I do like international, I like some international mysteries. Okay. So Peter Lovesey in Bath. I love reading Christopher Fowler, whose Bryant May series is set in London, because you feel like you're just, he often mentions, I have to read parts of it out loud to my husband. He's walking down Judd Street. He's at the Skinner Arms. We know all these places. I love Ellie Griffiths and her Ruth Galloway series set in the Norfolk Broads. But I'll go onto the continent as well. And I like Martin Walker's Bruno Chief of Police. Because, I know we can't call him a cozy, but what's the most important thing in his books? The countryside, the food, his dog. Oh yeah, some international guys are coming in to kill everybody. Whatever. Inspector Montalbano in Italy. I love those. So Ian Rankin, I mentioned those. So I guess I go international a lot. I don't read the Scandinavian noir stuff very much though.
I haven't read many of those. I wanted to throw in a few more people so I don't get in trouble. Because I blog with Jungle Red Writers, and I have to give a shout out to all of them. So for thrillers, it's like Hank Felipe Ryan and Hallie Efron. And then, talk about your British mystery. You got Deborah Crombie, who is my fellow cozy writer. And then we have Reese Bowen, who also does the World War II historicals, but has some amazing historical mysteries that I love. And then there's Julia Spencer Fleming, who's finally back to writing in her fantastic series set in upstate New York. So I covered them all. Whew, okay.
Thanks.
Let me tell you how upset I was. We finally got a new Julia Spencer Fleming book. We had her scheduled for an event in April. I was like, we finally get to see her again. I mean, I got to see her like last fall at BoucherCon. It's like, we finally get to host an event for her. We're so excited for this. And then a pandemic happened. I was just like, that was one of the early event cancellations that just crushed me the most. I was so looking forward to seeing people be so excited about that new book again, and we didn't get to do it.
And it's this is someone who, she was, she had a lot of stuff going on, and so she was 6 years between releases, but Hid From Our Eyes is such a great book. It was, and this is like in answering that question before, you could pick that book up having never read the series before, and the mystery is multi-time. She's got it in 3 different time periods, and you'd be fine, and you'd probably want to go back and read all the others. So.
Yeah, and so you guys have just mentioned so many of our store favorites, like Martin Walker. We're huge fans of his, and like you said, the food and the countryside is such a huge part of those books. We're all huge Simone St. James fans of the store. I think everybody on staff read Ellie Griffith's The Stranger Diaries last year and absolutely loved it. So you guys have the perfect Murder by the Book staff member reading tapes between the two of you.
Yay!
So I wanted to mention, since you guys have brought them up, so Peter Lovesey has just released the 50th anniversary of Wobble to Death. And this Friday at 6 o'clock here on YouTube, we're going to be doing a kind of virtual Peter Lovesey gala. So Louise Penny is going to tune in. We've got all kinds of people who are going to come in and toast Peter Lovesey to celebrate him having been in the business for 50 years. We're super excited about that. Also wanted to mention, since you guys both mentioned Paige Shelton, she's got a second book in the Alaska thriller series coming out, and then we'll be chatting with her next Wednesday here on YouTube too, which I'm super excited about.
It's really good. I got an early copy, I'm just saying.
Yeah, it's next in my stack after I finish what I'm reading, so that way I've been kind of saving it because I've been looking forward to that second one. So Marty, we had a question for you pop up. Sandy wants to know, are any of your books set in the US?
No. No, I need to go international to do my research. I have to, so.
It's a hardship. It's a hardship. Yeah, I know.
So what are you doing now that you can't go? Do you feel like you've gotten enough research from the trips before, and are you supplementing that with stuff like Google Maps, or how does that work now?
Oh yeah, Google Maps is fabulous. And I have my own maps, and we have, road atlases, and we have a lot of photos. A few years ago, the first time my husband got an iPhone, he takes He takes minute pictures of things, and I think, oh my gosh, he's taking so many pictures. And yet what happens in, do you have a picture of that sign that was by the narrowboat in Bath when we went? Yeah, he does. So here's my research. It's remembering a lot, you know, of past trips, and I can sort of channel myself and pretend I'm there, but I do look forward to going back again, that's for sure.
Mhm.
So we have a couple more minutes before we head out. I know you guys have both touched on it a little bit, but can you tell everybody who's watching what you have coming up next? Let's start with Jenn.
Oh, that's when I forget every title. I do that every time. Like, oh, what year is it? I can be forgiven this year. I don't have a book out until the end of April. So that's like this is the first time in 10 years I've gone more than a couple months without a book out. So that was crazy and weird and awesome. So it's kind of been nice. But at the end of April 27th, I have the next Cupcake Bakery mystery, and it's called For Batter or Worse.
Awesome.
So kind of gives you a little clue about what might be happening or not in that book. And then I'm completely forgetting the release date. I think it's the first week in August. That'll be Annabelle's story from Paris is Always a Good Idea, and that's called Wait for It. And she, the opening chapter is she's getting a proposal from an ex-husband. So she ends up fleeing Boston and takes a job with a friend in Phoenix, which was kind of nice for me because it's home. So it's kind of the whole, you know, leaving Boston in February to come to Cactus Lands. Nothing bad about that. And then I have the next Library Lovers mystery, and that one is called Killer Research, and that will come out next November. And I'm writing it right now, supposedly.
And how about you, Marty?
Well, let's see. So the first edition library mystery was The Bodies in the Library, Agatha Christie theme. Now Murder is a Must, Dorothy L. Sayers. Next fall, the third book will come out, and it has a Daphne du Maurier theme. And you think, Daphne du Maurier, Golden Age of Mystery? She was one of Lady Fowling's favorite authors, and so she's included in the library, so I get to use her. It's always nice to blame something on a character. Not my fault. And then in the meantime, Glamour Girls is out in January.
Awesome. So that actually reminds me, I wanted to ask you guys about titles. You know, Marty, that yours have kind of coincided with kind of the author that's featured in that book. So did the titles come easy to you, or was it something that took a little tweaking?
I either know a title or I don't know anything. I have absolutely no idea. And so as I was told once, titles are committee decisions. Titles and covers are committee decisions. And so if I don't have a clue, then I just let my agent and the editor and the team work on it. And they know best. And so I take what they want. I've absolutely loved the titles and the covers that Berkeley has done for the first edition library series. I love the colors and everything about them. They even have Bunter on them. Bunter is the tortoiseshell cat. So I know that whatever book 3 is and what it looks like, it will be great.
Mm-hmm.
And how about you, Jenn? Do you help come up with the titles, or is it also kind of a committee situation?
Marty pretty much nailed it. I either know the title, like for better or worse, I knew. Other titles I love and they don't. It usually goes to sales and marketing. Those are usually the people who are like, nah, we can't sell that. But you're like, but it's so good.
I know, I love it.
So, like the Paris book, actually took us months to come up with that title. And I had originally wanted to call it The Gap Year, but it didn't really fit the book. So the title's perfect. And I think my editor came up with that one. So yay. But Killer Research, the other thing with a series, and I think Marty knows this too, is that when you get so many books along, it's kind of hard to come up with those punny, it's like I'm running out of puns, people. So I have started on Facebook, I have a couple of different groups that I'm very fortunate that have formed around me. One is a fans of Jenn McKinlay page. It's an independent page. I don't really have anything to do with it except for I really like everybody there. They're very sweet and social. And so now when I'm stuck for a title, they'll have a contest and they'll all come up with whatever title they can, and then I'll send it to the publisher, and then they pick one, and so then we have a winner, and I either acknowledge them or I'll write them in as a character or whatnot. But Killer Research was a fan sourced title, and it's awesome. So yay!
That's great.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us this evening. Before we head out, a couple of quick disclaimers for everybody. So if you are local to Houston, Murder by the Book is open again. We opened up for customers to start coming in on Halloween, so you can come in and browse. We understand not everybody is up for coming into businesses at the moment, so we're still offering curbside pickup. We have all of Jenn and Marty's books in store, so you can either give us a call, you can order them online. We ship all over the place. If you're not local, definitely please support the authors, help support the bookstore. Wanted to mention also, if you are Cozy fans, this Saturday at 7, we are hosting a Cozy Christmas with Minotaur. And we'll have Carolyn Haynes, Donna Andrews, Ellie Alexander, and S.C. Perkins will all be talking about their newer Christmas releases. So you guys can find more info about that on the Murder by the Book website, which is murderbooks.com. Marty and Jenn, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was so great talking to you. I hope kind of once the world settles again, we can actually do this in person and get you guys down to the store again.
Yes. Thank you, John.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye, Marty.